Coming up right now, though, let's talk to Hamish to Bretton Gordon, OBE, former British Army Colonel, chemical weapons expert as well, because Ukraine's back in the news today. President Zelensky has warned that Russia might be planning to commit a new evil, in his words, by blowing up the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, blaming it on Ukrainian forces. We've heard these kind of warnings before, Hamish. Is this one any more real than the others?
Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, sorry. My apologies.
I think we need to take it seriously.
Yeah.
You know, had the Russians not blown up the Kakhovka Dam a few weeks ago, creating the biggest environmental disaster Europe's seen in a generation, I think we could dismiss this of the noise of this dreadful conflict. I mean, I can't think how evil or deranged you need to be thinking about blowing up a nuclear power station.
Yeah.
However, it is sort of within what I call the unconventional violence of the Russians' doctrine in their attack in Ukraine. They quite happily attack schools when children are on their way to school. They attack hospitals, and they also have been attacking the power grid for some time. We've seen just today they've attacked civilian houses in Lviv. So I'm afraid we have to take this seriously, however devastating it seems to be. And the fact that the Russians are telling people to get out of the place and get away from Zaporizhzhia, again, leads into the possibility that they might do something here. And the fact that their conventional military is failing so badly, the possibility that they might use this to try and stunt the Ukraine offensive is a possibility. And I think we must do all we can to make sure it doesn't happen.
Yes. The Times today's got an interesting interview with a guy they call the sort of the Ukraine spy master, a guy called Major General Kirill Budanov. I don't know if you know who that is, but he's talking about Russia being very much on the brink at the moment, and it's being a kind of critical period of time in the war, because, you know, clearly there have been, you know, wins and losses for them, as there have been for Ukraine. But there is a sense, isn't there, that there is a sort of a weakening, if you like, perhaps, of the Russian forces at this moment.
Well, they've taken a hell of a hammering, and the chief of the defence staff to the Defence Committee on Tuesday or Monday this week, I think it was articulating quite what a hammering they have taken. I think after the Prigozhin mutiny, which has really derailed the sort of Russian high command, they are sort of running out of ideas. All they have at the moment is human flesh to throw at the front. But it is likely that now that the Ukraine offensive is gaining momentum, they still haven't sort of found where they're going to strike. Actually doing something dreadful around Zaporizhzhia might well be the thing that that Putin thinks will turn his tide. But I mean, I'm delighted that the US Senate are going to try and pass a motion to declare if Zaporizhzhia blew up, it would be an Article 5 event, which would get NATO fully involved. And Putin at least knows that if NATO are fully involved, he is finished. I mean, I'd like to hear our own Prime Minister say something similar. And I'd also like to see the UN, who have been sat in their ivory tower, have been pretty ineffective in Ukraine so far, get people on the ground to create a demilitarized zone around the place to ensure that it can't be used as a sort of improvised nuclear weapon.
No, quite. And there's a NATO meeting coming up next week. Joe Biden's coming over to Europe for it. What's their sort of role in all of this, and what do you think they'll suggest?
Well, I expect the Zaporizhzhia threats and the Vilnius conference that you mentioned next week are not unrelated. Of course, you know, Putin wants NATO to do as little as possible, whereas what we need is to NATO to give Ukraine the wherewithal so that they can prevail. Hopefully next week. I mean, the key thing the Ukrainians are after is the F-16 jets, which has caused so much consternation, not least Ben Wallace's chance to become the next head of NATO seems to have gone up in smoke because of that. But that would be a game changer. Putin would then know the one thing that the Ukrainians lack is air superiority. And I think more weapons like the Storm Shadow, which is this long-range, very accurate cruise missile, which is, you know, really having a big effect in the logistics dumps behind the Russian front line. So I think unwavering support to Ukraine is what we must see next week, and more materiel, so that the Russians and particularly Putin knows the time's up, because he's trying to make this last as long as possible so that the Americans and ourselves, with elections coming up next year, start focusing on other things. But unless Russia's defeated, quite frankly, everything else is almost irrelevant.
Well, exactly right. And what do you make of the possibility of Ursula von der Leyen becoming the next NATO General Secretary? And that seems to be what Joe Biden wants to see.
Well, I think it's a shame that Ben Wallace is not. I mean, he is one of our most effective politicians and has been a really effective defence minister, in a trying time where, as we know, finance is very difficult. He would be excellent running running NATO rather. He was a soldier like myself and really understands the issues and is a quality politician. I'm sure Ms. von der Leyen is very good as well, but it seems more like a political expedient rather than getting somebody in post who really knows what they're doing and can make sure that NATO stays on the right track.
Well, that would be nice, wouldn't it, particularly in these difficult times. Hamish, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Hamish to Bretton Gordon, OBE, former British Army colonel and chemical weapons expert on this slightly difficult situation currently going on around the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, where both sides are kind of accusing the others of possibly planning to blow it up, which of course would end up with some kind of nuclear disaster on our hands if it did happen.